I was asked if I have a story for all ages, and I do. How many of you recognize the name Michael Jordan? Michael Jordan, 2,000 years from now, is going to be honored by a religious organization. It's going to be called the Church of Michael Jordan. And there are going to be stained glass windows in the sanctuary that show him flying through the air with a basketball in his hand. There are going to be members of this religious order who will be wearing little basketballs on necklaces. And they will sing songs about basketball. They will tell stories about basketball. But nobody will be playing basketball. And what I tell folks when I tell this story is that the same thing happened to Jesus. Jesus taught love and acceptance. He taught radical inclusion, even from the Samaritans. And the Samaritans were the marginalized people of his time. He even told a story called the Good Samaritan, which at least one theologian has said would be like talking about the black homosexual communist as a good guy. The Samaritans were that outcast. And so my hope is that at least some folks who profess a belief in Jesus will remember what he was all about. We're grateful for the gifts and the givers and hope that you are blessed and encouraged by all that you do as a congregation. Jan just brags on y'all. She thinks you are absolutely wonderful. And I've seen nothing to contradict that this morning. I was very warmly greeted out front, and you're just great. You're wonderful. I took some notes last night. I don't want to dwell on Charlie Kirk. I think the story is so horrible, and it doesn't really fit with the spirit in this room. But I did write, Charlie Kirk's murder was wrong, so was his language. He was not a nice man. You'll see in your order of service that I'm going to talk just a little bit about El Refugio. El Refugio is a nonprofit in southern Georgia that is very close to the Lumpkin Detention Center. And it provides housing and food and support for families of detainees. When the families come to visit the detainees from all over the southeast, they stay with El Refugio. And I'm bringing it up this morning because when the South Koreans were arrested at the battery factory, El Refugio heard about it, very quickly showed up with staff members to support the people who were being arrested. And a number of people tried to run. And when they did, local residents took their guns out and fired shots at them. Nobody was hit, thank goodness, but it resulted in horrible fear, horrible, you can imagine being shot at. It was terrible. You already know how wonderful you are. You notice it every time you show up here. And you also know that Jan thinks you're genuinely delightful. She calls you deep thinkers with passionate emotions about things like justice, fairness, diversity, equity, inclusion. Dare I say. When General Brown was fired as chairman of the Joint Chiefs for being a black man, we know that's why he was fired. I happened to be with one of my black colleagues in ministry in my home county near Forest City. And this guy's retired military, and he said to me, General Brown was fired because it was said he was not qualified to serve as chairman of the Joint Chiefs. And my friend said to me, no 4-star general is not qualified to be chairman of the Joint Chiefs. So that's the country we live in now, and as hard as it is, we gather together in part because we are dealing with all the horror, all the terrible things that are happening. And we honor within ourselves that we've got what it takes. We're going to be okay because we're going to do whatever we can to resist the horror. We're all made up of 50 trillion living cells. I have verified this with a number of sources, and it brings to mind the tips of our fingers. If our bodies are made up of 50 trillion living cells, you have to wonder how many are in the tips of our fingers. There must be quite a crowd in there. And they work together pretty well. We don't have to intentionally digest our food or beat our hearts, heal our wounds, or breathe our lungs in order to keep those 50 trillion living cells going. Let's breathe together. And just consider how amazing that is. How much atomic structure came into our lungs as we took that deep breath. And how much went back out. We're dealing with millions and billions of interactive cells, atoms, molecules. The whole darn thing's pretty amazing. And because it is, throughout history, and maybe before there was history, people have created religions. We've created religions to respond to the awesome mystery of what it is to be alive. And of course, we as Unitarian Universalists, we think we have the best religion. Right? A friend of mine, a UU friend of mine, sent me a cartoon from the New Yorker, and it showed these people coming out of a house of worship, and they were holding up those styrofoam hands that have the number 1 finger up, and written on the styrofoam hands was, "We're number 1." And they were coming out of a worship service and kind of shouting out to anybody around. And one of the guys in the cartoon looks over at another one and says, "Maybe we're getting carried away with this." But of course, that's not true of us. We have our vaulted opinion of ourselves in perfect balance. Perfect balance. Whatever we might believe or not believe among spirituality, divinity, ritual, music, Jeremy, thank you so much. We know that all of it is reaching for the transcendent, whatever more we might find among the jumbled incidences of our lives, whatever ultimate value. And we share this with all of humanity. This is shared. Everybody thinks they're getting it right. We just happen to be right. In my own quest for an even keel of religious life, in response to the transcendent, I have to deal with lessons learned. Here's one huge lesson. Arrogance. Arrogance. Because of knowledge, social status, money, looks, wardrobe, accomplishment, all of it is poison. If it buys into the lie of separation. Thich Nhat Hanh said, our work is to awaken from the lie of separation. And Michelle, I appreciate it so much you're giving me a namaste as you came through the door this morning. I'm sorry I wasn't quick enough to respond, but we all must awaken from the lie of separation. I was in a group one night, and a young man asked me, he said, am I wrong to feel pride when I hit a home run in a softball game? And I told him, no. But I also said, I kind of wish you felt pride when other people hit home runs, even guys playing for the other team. Sporting events don't become dehumanizing until we are taught to hate the other team, and then they dehumanize us. How wonderful it would be if defeat in sports could be celebrated alongside victory. And what about those we call Losers. Help me. The poor, the addicted, the criminals, the downtrodden for any reason leave us with the old, tired expression, there but for the grace of God go I. Empathy requires involvement, at least a little, at some healing level. Can we literally offer a helping hand? And I know you all do it all the time. You're always offering a helping hand, and I just appreciate it so much. One of the most dramatic things that ever happened to me in ministry, a guy called me on the telephone and said he wanted to quit drinking. I said, well, let's go to an AA meeting. And he and I together went to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he decided that night he was going to quit drinking. The next morning, he got a telephone call from his cousin, who was his drinking buddy, and the cousin said, let's go drinking. And Mike said, no, I'm not going to go drinking. I went to AA last night, and I've decided to quit drinking. True story. Later that day, the cousin was killed in a head-on automobile accident. Mike credits that trip to that AA meeting with saving his life. To add even more drama to the story, the accident occurred across a field out the front of my parents' home. I could sit on my parents' front porch and see where that man died. We lose heart, we lose shared humanity when we assume that we are better than other people. I love to joke that Unitarian Universalists don't really believe they're better than anybody else, except people who think they're better than other people. We're definitely better than that crowd. It is not a matter of there, but for the grace of God go I. That's not it. It is instead rich connection. Yes, I have a better education than Mike. I've probably read more books. I can probably sing more songs. But he would be much better at putting a new spark plug in a car, or changing a tire, or operating a chainsaw. By the way, my wife does not allow me to operate a chainsaw. Oftentimes, our pride in what we know and how we believe things are bedevils us with a sense of being better than. That better than is a deadly distillation that falsely cooks us out of our shared humanity. Do we even want to share humanity? We have to learn to listen. When was the last time you set aside your own stories to listen attentively in a conversation? Way too many conversations consist of our talking over each other so we can finally say what that last person's sentence has reminded us of. Martha Barron died of cancer. Martha was a bedrock person in the Greenville UU in South Carolina. And she came to me one day and she said, why won't people listen to me talk about my cancer? As soon as I start talking about it, they start telling me about their cancer, or their mother's cancer, or their cousin's cancer. She said, I want to talk about my cancer. And eventually she did get to talk about her cancer. When I encourage people to listen, they will many times tell me about their friends or relatives who can talk the balls off a pool table. Now, I know there are those people out there. Nobody in this room, of course, but I'm sure. There are people who simply talk compulsively. I describe it as talking on the inhale and the exhale. It feels like it's almost at epidemic proportions in our society. These people are completely hobbled by self-importance. They imagine themselves to be an inexhaustible source of wisdom, humor, meaningful opinions, and good stories. I'm not exactly sure how they sleep at night. Doubtless some of them are still talking. But at the risk of being snared by one of these magpies, risk deep listening, caring listening. The kind of listening that dares to ask a question like, how did that make you feel? Say more about that. Tell me more. A man was sitting in a bar at a sales conference, and a woman came in and sat down beside him, and they introduced themselves, and then she said, "Tell me what you do for a living." He said, "Well, I'm in sales." She said, "Oh, I bet that's interesting. What do you sell? What's your territory? How do you approach new customers?" He told her. Then she said, "Do you have any interesting hobbies?" And he said, "Well, yes, I'm a scuba diver." And she said, "Oh, scuba diving, that sounds so wonderful. Tell me more about it." And he started to answer her question. But instead he said, "Will you marry me?" What about learning to be a better listener? What about learning to be a better listener would help us through the current crisis? Do we dare listen to folks on the other side? Good, attentive, serious listening can deepen our relationship with others, but it can also deepen our relationship with our own inner wisdom. Think about that for a minute. There are so many situations in life where we will be directed to the best course of action if we will get quiet and still and take a few deep breaths. Our inner wisdom comes from our conscience. And unless we suffer from delusion or serious mental illness, that conscience is connected to universal standards of right and wrong. I really think I can make it work. And if I make it work, I'm going to be able to get another guy to an AA meeting. Getting to those connections points to what I believe is the purpose of my life. And I know many of you feel the same way. Lending a helping hand, one incident at a time, one hand held. Or as Bill likes to do, one pat on the back. The difference between an ego that sucks all the air out of the room and getting that guy to that AA meeting is a matter of scale. If I truly dream of the world beating a path to my door, as Emerson said of the man who creates the better mousetrap, then I have to follow a very narrow path. I have to focus my energy on only one thing, only on that mousetrap. But if I dream of getting Mike to one more AA meeting, if I dream of touching one hand, one situation in a helpful way, then I will meet with success unimagined in common hours, as Thoreau wrote. My dream is to be of use. Our inner wisdom might guide us to the small things we can do to be of service, especially to those who hurt worst by the present evil government. Our inner wisdom might guide us to the words of Mother Teresa. We need not do great things. We need to simply do small things with great love.